Still talking about the powers of the National Assembly, I'm worried about the powers of suspension, as a lot of people are. There be court judgments to the effect that the lawmakers can suspend one of theirs, yet they still continue to do it, thereby depriving the constituents that such a lawmaker represents of the powers of representation.
I think the National Assembly is being very immature and in some respect acting childishly. I remember when Dino Melari was in the House of Representatives, he went to court when he was suspended, and the court said his suspension was wrong for the reasons that you've articulated, namely that there is no constitutional power to suspend. And even if they passed a law giving themselves the power to suspend, such a law would be null and void, being inconsistent with the constitutional rights which the constituents have to be represented at the National Assembly. Now, having regard to that framework, it's a little surprising that they should all suffer amnesia and say, well, you know, we don't see, the court cannot interfere with the way we work. No, we're all guided by laws. That's the essence of rule of law. You cannot choose or pick and choose which aspects of a law or court decisions to obey. The courts are there to interpret the law. If you're not happy with the interpretation which is imposed on a particular provision of the law, you exercise a right of appeal or a right of intervention and then appealing it. It's not for you to choose to ignore the court decision by saying, well, we don't tell the courts how they do their work. They cannot tell us how we do their work. It's just like saying a chief judge can suspend another judge. He cannot. There's a procedure for suspension of judges through the NJC, but there is no procedure for suspension of any member through any constitutional or, for that matter, even legislative process. And they cannot make it up ad hoc because they don't like your face or because they don't like what you said. I remember in the case of the former chairman of the House of Reps Appropriation Committee, where he blew the whistle last year that they were helping themselves to large sums of money, they promptly suspended him for 6 months, a power which they don't have. And for Ovioma Agege telling the Senate that he didn't think it is right to reverse the sequence, set up the ethics committee, which is like a kangaroo committee, to investigate, and lo and behold, surprise, surprise, they come up and say, well, it's a very serious offense. We could have suspended you for 180 days, but out of exercise of the powers of clemency and leniency, we should just do so for 90 days. But that begs a whole series of questions. Where do they derive the power to suspend? How can they wake up and then say we suspend? It's simply lawlessness. And to try and impede him by saying they will get the police should not obey such a law because the law itself is unlawful. The direction from the Senate, Ovioma Agege should not sit, is unlawful, and the police is not required to execute unlawful directives. It is not because they are part of the executive, it's because they are required to uphold the law.
Won't that just create more anarchy in the system?
If it is something they think is within their legislative powers, they should pass an act. For example, amend the Legislative Privileges Act to insert provisions there and then see whether those provisions are valid against the Constitution. They cannot exercise or purport to exercise ad hoc powers which exist nowhere.
But as it so happens, they do it and they get away with it.
Yes, they do it and they get away with it. But that is just lawlessness. It's like saying they ignore the court decisions when it suits them. But as soon as someone tries to recall them, for example, they rush off to court, give me an injunction. You know, so the courts are being cherry-picked in that sense. They use and abuse the courts as they see fit. And that's why I started by saying they were acting very childishly. If this society is going to thrive, if our democracy is going to work, and if our institutions are going to be strengthened, all of us must be guided by the law. We cannot pick and choose which aspects of the law to observe, which court decisions to obey.
Finally, Prof, the President said on Voice of America, VOA, that he doesn't support the creation of state police because there's no provision for it in the Constitution. Do you agree with him?
I don't agree. I think I must start by saying that as a 50-something-year-old Nigerian, I have never seen Nigeria more divided at any time than it is now. That's the first point. Secondly, I've never seen Nigerians killed on such large scale as we're witnessing under this government. I think when General Danjuma said the people of the state, Taraba, should defend themselves because the Nigerian armed forces will defend them, people commented and said, was he supposed to say that or not? But I think that these factors provide a framework for us to consider state policing. People are just being killed and slaughtered, like, not even with the respect that you accord your chickens and goats. And then someone is saying to you, well, I don't support state police because there is no provision in the Constitution which says it. And then he also gave a second reason, that most of the states are financially bankrupt. They can't even pay wages. So how will they be able to pay for the police? I don't think that those answers are even addressing the issue. The issue is a widespread insecurity in the land. I think the consideration should be given seriously to state police, because in most federal systems like the US, you've got state police. I know because of our own ethnic and regional problems, there are more issues that we need to consider before implementing the state police. But certainly we must begin to address those issues if we're going to arrest the widespread insecurity.